Thank you all for joining us tonight on this frigid February evening to learn about birds and how to ID birds. It is an exciting journey, I think, because it is something that you can do all year round. If you look outside this time of year, we've got lots of sleeping plants. So you can't go on a hike and identify plants. You can identify trees. I just did a winter tree ID, but it's really hard sometimes. However, birds are here year round and they change throughout the year. So there's always something new and exciting to see, even in this outdoor Arctic tundra that we are living in right now. There are birds outside the window. Some birds, in fact, migrate here to Iowa in the wintertime to our balmy weather because it's really cold where they're coming from. So yeah, birds here are year round, and if it's something you get into, you will always have a chance to do it, whether you're driving somewhere, maybe you're sitting in the back of your parents' car bored. Look outside, see if you can find some birds hanging out on the electrical wires or flying across all the fields in Iowa. So again, something you can do just about anywhere. And the birds that we have in Iowa are fabulous. Look at the colors of these gorgeous birds. So that's going to help us later on to do some of our identification. Every once in a while, we will even get some amazing birds that happen to grace our state for a little time in the winter, such as the snowy owl. That was one of the few that have been with us this winter, coming from the colder north, maybe not tonight, but coming down from the cold north. Now, before we get too far, many of you might be wondering, how in the world can something smaller than my hand survive outside in this weather where I am like bundled 3 feet out with stuff to even walk to my car to go somewhere? Well, here are a few ways that they are able to survive in the winter. So their feathers are a wonderful insulator. What they will do, this chickadee looks really fat over there, but he's not, he's just poofed. So when they poof up, that creates this layer of air between their feathers and their body, and that's an insulating layer that helps to keep them warm. They're also warm-blooded, so they control their temperature. They're not like the snakes and the turtles and the insects out there that have to hibernate or just die for the winter. But because of their warm-bloodedness, they are able to survive. A few other techniques they have for surviving the winter is many of them will stay in flocks. So they will hang out together and kind of snuggle together, kind of like we do on our couches at night with our kids or our pets, or maybe just a bunch of blankets and pillows. So they will snuggle up together and help share their body heat. They also have this amazing thing called counter current heat exchange. Say that 5 times fast. I can barely say it 1 time. But this is a picture of if you see in the bottom, I always point at my screen. You can't see my finger. We're looking at the bird's legs. So that's what this little outset thing here is. So if you look at that red blood, that is the blood that is coming down the legs to the feet. The blue blood is the cold blood coming up from the feet, going towards the heart. Now, if we back up and look at our little chickadee here, they run about 105 degrees. So we are 98.6. They are 105. Their feet, however, are 30 degrees. So very close to freezing. If that 30-degree blood made it up to their heart, it'd probably kill them with the coldness. But because of this counter current heat exchange, as that cold blood is coming back up their legs, the hot blood is coming down their legs from the heart. They exchange heat and cold. So you can see that through the red arrows, the heat's going to the cold blood, the cold's going to the warm blood. So it really makes that temperature difference. It allows them to survive, and it keeps their feet from becoming frozen. So kind of a cool adaptation that they have to help keep them from losing all their little feet throughout the winter. So those are a few different ways that they are able to survive our somewhat frigid winters. So Jerry, here is our first poll. So I want to know from my audience tonight, what kind of bird watcher are you? So are you a beginner? Are you just at the start of your journey? Are you an intermediate? Do you know your basic birds? Are you an expert? Because if you're an expert, I might lean on you a little bit later to answer some questions. So go ahead and answer that. We'll give you a few seconds. While we're doing that, I am kind of at the intermediate stage. I'm definitely more of a hobby birder. I know some pretty basic birds, maybe a few interesting ones that aren't so basic, but by no means am I an expert, but I do know some experts. So if there are any questions out there that I can't answer, then I can definitely find an expert to answer that for you. How are we doing, Jerry?
We got 12 people that replied, so I'm going to go ahead and share those results so you can see them.
Awesome. All right. So you all are kind of right there with me. We have some newbies to the journey and some of those that are partially up the road. So awesome. So we can go ahead and close that, and then we'll test this and see if I can keep moving forward. It's still not going to do it for me. No problem. So what I am going to do is go through some ways that you can hopefully become a better birder. And I apologize here. I have to restart my screen share here. See if I can do that. So we're going to go through something called the 7 S's. And the 7 S's are a way to help you identify birds. So the first S is the shading or the color. Okay, so you want to look at the color of the birds. So here we have a northern cardinal. It's probably a bird that many of you are familiar with. So looking at the coloring, you've got to be careful because the boys and the girls are sometimes different colors. So we know that bright red from the cardinal, but the female, the one on the right, is also a cardinal. It just happens to be the girl. Now, why do the girls get the drab colors? Well, it's because they have a very important job to do. They have to protect the eggs and sit on the nest. So if they were this nice bright color that a lot of the males are, a lot of the boys are, predators, things that would want to eat them would pick them off like that and have a nice little cardinal snack. And then the eggs would never hatch out because there'd be no parent to keep them warm and care for them. So make sure when you're looking at colors, you're aware that sometimes the same bird family, they can have different colorization. Also, another thing to be aware of is color in summer versus color in the winter. So this is a goldfinch. In the summer, they are this nice bright golden with that black hat, but in the winter, they look a lot closer to the female. So just another thing to be aware of, that different times of year, these birds might look a little different. So that is the first S, the color. Now the second S is size. So small like a sparrow, large like a goose, or somewhere in between, robin or crow size. All pretty common birds that many of us are probably familiar with. So good birds to base your sizing on. So the color, the size. Next we have the shape. So basically you want to think the silhouette. Is it short and fat? Is it tall and long? Does it have a long neck? Does it have long legs? Is it short and round? Does it have a thick beak? So think about that silhouette, and that will help you. I'm sure many of you looking at these silhouettes here could probably pick out the cardinal and maybe even the great blue heron. And maybe the crow, because some silhouettes are just so distinct to that specific bird. So looking at the shape, here are some examples. So you can see we've got our white-breasted nuthatch on the left. That's a very distinct silhouette. And the red-bellied woodpecker on the right. Again, another very distinct silhouette that they have. So if you can't see the color, if you can't see the shading, look for the shape of them. That'll definitely be an indicator of what bird you might have. So number 4 is the song. So some people, not this person, but some people out there are able to identify birds simply by their songs. They can go walk through the woods, blindfolded and tell you which bird is which. Again, I'm not there, but I do know some basic songs. So we'll see if we can go here. And the website that I'm going to is all about birds, and it's an awesome website, lots of sounds. So here is our nuthatch. And it kind of sounds like he has a stuffy nose. That's what we like in that one too, the yank, 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 yank. The chickadee, which is kind of our mascot for this program because he pops up a lot in here. The chickadee, so it kind of has that beep, beep. Or sometimes they say their name and they'll say chickadee, dee, dee, dee. So I think it's awesome when birds say their name because they're basically telling you who they are. Okay, so I'm going to leave off the next two sounds, but if you go to that allaboutbirds.com, or there's many websites out there that have the bird sounds in them, probably some apps out there as well that you can check on and download and get some cool bird sounds on to help you when you are out bird watching. The fifth S, sweep. So how does it fly or act? So if we look at this black-capped chickadee, they are moving constantly. They're always hopping around, always flitting around. So if you see a bird that you might think is a chickadee, but it's not doing anything, it's just sitting, probably not a chickadee. So behaviors are another good way. Unique behaviors are pretty good. Something like an American kestrel that we'll see a little bit later on. Every time they land, they bob their tail 3 times. So that is a very unique behavior. Some birds might bob their head a different way. So knowing those behaviors also will help you to identify. Something like the blue jay. They are always standing tall and at attention. Okay, they all have very good posture. So, oops, touching too many buttons here. So they are, that is just kind of their shape, always up and standing at attention. If you look at something like, moving forward, maybe not, but lots of birds have different shapes. Something like a woodpecker. They're probably going to be on the side of a tree, maybe drumming on the tree, looking for insects. There are some animals that are on the ground, some birds that are constantly on the ground. This flicker is a type of woodpecker that is known for being always on the, well, not always on the ground, but if there's a woodpecker on the ground, it is probably the northern flicker. Also how they're flying. So that's part of sweep, part of number 5. The American goldfinch, if you can see that outline there, it flies through the air like a roller coaster. A lot of woodpeckers also have that undulating flight through the air. So if you see something that's flying like that, you might not know exactly what it is, but you can rule out a lot of things and narrow down what the potential bird is that you are looking at. Number 6 is surroundings or habitat. Where do you see it? So here is a ring-necked pheasant, and it's running through an open field because that is their habitat. Now, I will say I have seen a pheasant in a forest before, so there are exceptions to basically everything out there. But generally, pheasants are going to be out in a field. Something like a sharp-shinned hawk, they are forest birds. So if you see a hawk sitting on a power line, probably not going to be a sharp-shinned hawk, probably more likely going to be a red-tailed hawk or some other hawk species that is out there. So knowing where they live is going to greatly benefit you in helping you identify the birds. Obviously, if you're in a marsh or a wetland, those are going to be marsh or wetland species. So just knowing where you are, probably not going to find a red-tailed hawk in the middle of this marsh in front of us. So maybe a peregrine falcon out there hunting, but it's not going to be swimming with all of the ducks and the geese. So again, habitat, surroundings is number 7 or 6, I apologize. Number 7. Is it, what is the season that you are looking at the birds? And then knowing if that bird is a year-round resident or if it migrates. So these are two pictures of some of our winter migrators, the junco and the pine siskin. So I am curious to know, which of these two birds do you think migrates out of Iowa for the winter? So Jerry, if you want to pull up, oh, perfect. So the rose-breasted grosbeak or the kestrel, which one of these birds migrates and can you not see in Iowa in the wintertime? We'll give you a few seconds to figure out how you want to answer that. Use your brain, not your miniature computer that you have at your disposal. Take a guess.
I'm not seeing a poll at all.
Jerry, did you launch a poll?
It says it's in progress.
Oh, mine is up on my screen.
Okay,
I got
there it is.
13 people have, okay,
Okay.
14.
I
now,
use an
that's good.
iPad and I had to actually touch on the command.
Oh, interesting. Ooh, so we are 64% to 36%. Well, to help us figure out the answer, I went to one of my, it's gonna do it to me again. I went to my favorite book that we use out here at McFarland Park with our school groups. And we have chosen to use it just because it is such an easy to use book for the students. And it is Birds of Iowa. Let's see here. Let me go back to screen sharing. Birds of Iowa by Stan, I'm going to say Tequila, but I'm not really sure if that's how you say it. So this is an excellent field guide, and I'm going to show you real quick why before I get to our correct answer. So if you look at the side of this, it has got lots of colors. So you can see what the color is of your bird. So that first S, shading, go to that color in the book and then flip through and see if you can find your bird. Now, if we flip to the rose-breasted grosbeak page, which is in the black and white section, we can see that it is a summer resident of Iowa. So if we were to see it right now outside, no way, it is not supposed to be here. So it migrates. So 2/3 of you were correct. It was the grosbeak that was a migrator. If we look at the kestrel page, it is here year round. So that's another good indicator. And I like this book for that reason too, because I can look at that little map and it's going to tell me if it's supposed to be here at the time I see it. If we go to our junco, it is here in the wintertime. So it migrates here during the winter. And then our lovely chickadee, we've got the orange for the year round as well. So just an excellent book to be able, I mean, it's just very user friendly, has some cool information in it. And I will be sharing with you some information from that book when we get into the actual bird identification here. Now, maybe you don't want to carry a book around with you. Maybe you want to use that miniature supercomputer that we all have these days. You can go to merlinbirdid.com or any of your app stores, whichever phone you use, and download Merlin, which is an awesome ID app. It has a function actually where you can take a picture of a bird and it identifies it for you. I will caution you with that though, because I took pictures of chickadees just outside of our feeders here at McFarland Park. And my first one was a little blurry. So I didn't fault the app for not being able to identify it, but I did get a really good picture and chickadee was not even one of the answers that it gave me. So at some point, make sure you're using that gray matter between your ears when you are using these apps, because sometimes we got to do a little more research before you can figure out the actual bird. Now, a cool thing about the Merlin Bird app is it goes through some of those S's that we've already talked about. So you've got your bird sizing. Notice those are the same 4 that we used in the 7 S's. We've got the colors, so the shading, and then behavior. So all these things will help narrow it down for you. And then it gives you a nice list of birds that could possibly be what you are looking at. So pretty cool app, but again, be careful with the picture feature because that's not always going to be accurate. So what I'd like to do now is go through about 20 of the common birds that we do have in Iowa this time of year. And these might be very helpful for the great backyard bird count that I'm going to talk with you about towards the end of the program. So this is the first bird I wanted to bring up, and this is a house finch. So you can see this is one of those birds where the boys and the girls look different. The boys have the bright feathers. Some of them, we had one at our feeders today that the color was so much brighter than what is in this picture here. And they have that nice big finch beak for cracking seeds. This is an interesting one. So while putting this together, I found out some new facts to me about some of these birds. So house finches are fairly new to Iowa. So it was first recorded in Iowa in 1982, which if we have children out there right now, they're thinking 1982, that was like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Well, really, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't so long ago. How this happened, they are native. So they are native to the Western United States, so like California. And then at some point, someone decided to take some with them to New York City on the East Coast and release them. That happened about 1940, and it took them till 1982 to make it all the way across to Iowa. So now this is a bird that we have in our state. Next, our little mascot, the black-capped chickadee. He's got that black hat on his head. This is a year-round species we have in Iowa. They need to eat every single day in the wintertime. So even on that day 2 weeks ago when we had that blizzard on that day that, gosh, I don't think anybody left their house, or they shouldn't have. This bird was out eating because it had to eat. So it will be out foraging during the worst of storms. Now these next 2 birds, very similar. So we've got the red-breasted nuthatch and the white-breasted nuthatch. This one is only here in the winter. So the red-breasted nuthatch only will be around in the winter time. It's identifiable and different from the white-breasted nuthatch because of that black eye stripe. And it's got a lot more coloration on its chest feathers. Both of these birds have a really cool adaptation. Notice they are facing down on the tree. Now, usually it's only woodpeckers that can go down on a tree. Now, the reason that this guy, and you can kind of see it in this picture, if you look at that back foot and you look at the back toe on the back foot, they have an elongated toe. So a really long toe. Maybe some of you have a really long toe on your foot. I don't think it'd help you walk down backwards on a tree, but for this bird, that is exactly what it does. So that's how they are able to go backwards to most birds down the tree, head facing down. Now, a really cool thing about the white-breasted nuthatch is that those light colored feathers on their chest kind of act like a little reflector, a little mirror of the light, and it lights up the bark underneath of them. So they might be casting a shadow, but the light reflecting off of them allows them to see into those cracks and crevices so that they can get any insects or things that they might otherwise have missed because it was too dark for them to see. So another kind of cool adaptation. Again, red-breasted nuthatch is only here in the winter, and this guy is here all year round, the white-breasted nuthatch. Now, the tufted tip mouse is another year-round resident, and something fun I learned about this bird was that they are notorious, and I say that without ever actually having seen it myself, but really wanting to someday, for pulling hair out of sleeping dogs and sleeping cats and even sleeping squirrels to line their nest with. I can't imagine a sleeping squirrel waking up to a bird yanking fur off of it. Again, I think that would be just a super cool thing to see. So if anybody out there gets a recording of that, please send it to me. This next one was a new bird to me this year. I'm sure I have seen it in the past, but I have mistaken it for this one, the goldfinch, just because of the yellow. I didn't look any further. However, the pine siskin has stripes in the feathers on its chest and its belly. So that is one of the big differences between those. And again, this pine siskin is just a winter resident. There are a few tiny spots in Iowa where it might be year round, but mostly it is just going to be here in the winter. The interesting thing about the pine siskin is that they will nest in groups. So they might nest in a tree and their nests might only be a few feet from each other, which is an interesting behavior that a lot of birds don't have. They have nests and territories really far apart from each other. So an interesting behavior out of this one. Now the goldfinch, remember, it changes color in the winter. So the really cool thing about the goldfinch, and many of you probably know this, it is our state bird. So we'll see if I can get my words right. So as our state bird, it is gold and black. Okay, so think about those colors. It is not red and gold. So I'm going to let you make your own connection with that one. And we are going to go ahead and move on to the American tree sparrow. So cute little guy. He is often called the winter chippy because he looks like the chipping sparrows that we have in the summertime. Big difference though is that big spot in the middle of his chest feathers. And that is how you can tell the difference. And chipping sparrows aren't here in the wintertime. Now this bird, the dark-eyed junco, this is one that migrates here from Canada. So it is here in balmy Iowa, because I guess Canada's worse than Iowa sometimes in the wintertime. And another really interesting fact is that the female juncos will fly further south than the males. So we might just have males here right now and the females are like hanging out on a beach in the Gulf or something like that. So just something new and interesting that I first learned today, actually, that the females will fly further south than the males. These next two birds are not native birds. They are birds that were not originally in Iowa, not even originally in the United States. So house sparrow, year-round resident, it was introduced from Europe into Central Park in New York, which seems to have been a popular thing to have done in the 1850s. So since then it is spread out and it's pretty much all over the United States. This next one, it is, I kind of like the story behind this one. Not the best bird to have around, and I'll tell you why here in just a few seconds. But this bird is here because there was a Shakespeare enthusiast who thought that the United States should have every single bird that can be found in a Shakespeare play. The European starling was mentioned in one line in one play. And this guy thought, well, that's enough for me, and brought a flock over, releasing it again into Central Park in New York City. See, common thing to do in 1890. And again, now this bird is everywhere. Now, the bad thing about these birds, like it's not their fault they're here. They didn't want to be introduced here. They just happen to thrive in our landscape, but they will displace native birds. So they might kick native birds out of their nests. They've been known to build nests over top of native bird nests, thereby crushing the eggs below or the babies below. So not the greatest birds to have around, but again, it's really not their fault they're here. That was a human thing. We make mistakes like that from time to time. Now I want to get into some of the woodpeckers that you might see out there. So we've got our little mustachioed woodpecker here, the northern flicker. A really cool thing about this bird, this is the one that you oftentimes will see on the ground. Well, in the summertime when there's ants around, they love to eat ants. Ants don't love to be eaten. So they will release an acidic defense. So like acid, they'll release acid. Imagine trying to eat something that is acid all around it. The flicker has ant acid in its saliva. So it has spit that is basically like Tums for your stomach, right? And that will counteract the acid in the ants so that they can eat them. So kind of a cool adaptive defense mechanism out of that northern flicker. Red-headed woodpeckers. This is, I think it's one of the most gorgeous woodpeckers that we have here. It's a year-round, as are all of the woodpeckers I'm talking about tonight. And their beak is not very good at excavating holes in trees. It doesn't chip away at the wood very well. So you will most often find their nesting cavities in rotting trees and branches because they're just not strong enough to get into those healthy trees. So if you're looking for a red-headed woodpecker nest, look in dead trees. Don't look in like freshly dying trees that are still quite healthy. Then we have the red-bellied woodpecker. Now, this one also could have been called the red-headed woodpecker because it has that gorgeous red mohawk on it. But many birds were named at the time when bird watching was done with a gun and not binoculars. So birds would get shot, pick them up, and that's how they would be identified and named. So if you had this bird in your hand, it really does have quite a red belly. You can see it in this picture a little bit on the side, but when you flip it over, it is red. And to differentiate it from the red-headed woodpecker, I mean, we couldn't have two of those, so that's why they went with the red-bellied. Now, these next two birds are very, very similar. So we've got the hairy woodpecker in the upright picture on the left and the downy woodpecker in the small picture. Now, looking between these two, there is a difference of red on the back of the head. That's just telling us that that hairy woodpecker is a male. Male downy woodpeckers also have red on the back of the head. Now, looking at them next to each other, you might be able to differentiate them, might be able to tell them apart. But if they're not next to each other, here is a cool trick. So if you look at the beak of the hairy woodpecker, so there is a line that is as long as the beak. I copied that line and pasted it right over the head. So their beak is almost as long as their head is. Now, if we move over to the downy woodpecker, there's the size of the beak. If I move that over to the head, it's not even half the distance. So looking at that beak, comparing it with the head, that's going to tell you the difference between these two birds if you don't have them side by side. Something pretty cool I learned about these guys today, if you look at the tip, like at the end of their beak, those hairs that are there are right above their nostrils. So those hairs help to keep out sawdust from their nostrils when they're pecking away at the wood and chips are flying. Those hairs are going to keep them from snorting up the sawdust. And I think it'd be kind of interesting to see them sneeze, but I'm guessing those hairs are what helps to keep them from sneezing every time they're just trying to get a meal or excavate their home out of a tree. Here's a lovely bird that has a very distinct silhouette. So if you can't see the color on this one, you almost always can tell it's a mourning dove just because of the outline. These guys get the award for the worst nest builders. They build very flimsy platform nests that on the slightest storm will fall apart and they'll have to rebuild it. So not great at nest building. Do not hire them for your next carpentry project. Not that you'd hire a bird anyway, but you know. Ring-necked pheasants. So I have seen quite a few of these. They're a lot more visible on top of snow because of their gorgeous colorization. Many of you might know, some of you might not know that these are also not native birds to Iowa. They were introduced from China in the late 1800s as a game bird, something for people to hunt over here. So again, something though that you can see in the winter, also not very well adapted to Iowa winters. That's why their population will fluctuate so much from year to year, depending on how hard the winter was, how deep the snow cover was, so on and so forth. And they are here year round, as is this guy, the red-tailed hawk. So when I brought up the sharp-shinned hawk earlier, when we were talking about habitat, he has a striped tail. Well, red-tailed hawks also have a striped tail until they are 2 years old. So if you see a hawk sitting on a power line like the one in this picture is, and it has a striped tail, probably still a red-tailed hawk, even though it doesn't have that red tail. So again, knowing the different colorizations on these birds from year to year will definitely help with identification. We're only going to talk about one owl today, the great horned owl, and we do have a few others that are in Iowa year round. This guy is actually probably nesting right now. They mate in January and then they lay eggs in end of January, beginning of February. So they are quite possibly sitting on eggs right now. Kudos to them because it is freezing outside and they are out there protecting those eggs. So birds are always just a wonder to me how they're able to survive Iowa sometimes. And you can see this guy's all pooped up, also showing us that great insulating properties of those feathers that they have. Last bird that I want to talk about is our bald eagle. You can't do a winter bird ID in Iowa without talking about our national symbol, the bald eagle. So again, this one, different colors depending on how old it is. So when it's young, it's brown, it's mottled. You might even confuse it with the golden eagle that sometimes we do get in our state. However, when it is an adult, there is no mistaking this bird for anything else with that white head and that golden beak and that white tail. These birds are right now either finishing up their nest building or they are also sitting on eggs. I have not checked the Decora cam lately. Should have done that, but maybe I'll get on that tomorrow to see if they are sitting on eggs yet up there. But that's a cool thing to watch is that Decora camera. And there's lots of other wildlife cameras out there that show us these things that we wouldn't have a chance to see otherwise. All right, so let's see who remembers. So this is our next poll. Which of these two birds is a goldfinch, number 1 or number 2? So while you are filling this out, Jerry, are there any questions to answer up to this point that I can do?
There are no questions in the chat room.
All right, perfect. Again, though, if you do have questions, please throw them up in the chat room and I would be happy to answer or find an expert who can answer them for us. Ooh, good job, everybody. So we've got 79% of you who are correct. So remember, the pine siskin is number 2, has those stripes in the feathers. I always point at my screen. You guys can't see what I'm pointing at, but they have those stripes and those feathers on their chest, whereas the goldfinch does not have those stripes. So good job, everybody. So I'm going to have to, again, exit out of this and move on. So next, I want to show you some local resources that we have right here in Story County, that if you want to get into bird watching a little more, there are plenty of close places that you can do that. Let me get back up here. And so here are some websites. Maybe, there we go. So we have, of course, our local Audubon Society chapter, the Big Blue Stem Audubon. They have programs and field trips, not right now because of the pandemic, but I'm assuming that in the future those will come back into play. Then there's the overall Iowa Audubon. So again, another great resource for all things birds. If you have young ones who are interested in birding, we have an amazing Iowa Young Birders chapter based out of Ames. They do field trips, they do programming. It really truly is, they do such a good job with those young birders. And field trips across the state. I'm not talking about coming out to McFarland and bird watching from Ames. I'm talking about going like all the way to the west coast of the state and checking out some refuges over there. And then the Iowa Ornithologists Union. which has also some wonderful resources. In fact, the Iowa Young Birders, this is a program they have coming up that I want to help them promote. If you have young birders that are interested in owls, this will be a great educational program to sign up for. And you can go through their website, the Young Birders, or even just Googling Young Birders of Iowa or Iowa Young Birders, you should be able to find this. But it looks like it's going to be an amazing owl program, and February is an excellent time to learn about owls. A lot of these sites will have checklists, and these checklists are what I based this PowerPoint off tonight on, knowing which birds I needed to point out to everybody. So I love that there's checklists out there. Some of these checklists, like the Iowa Ornithologists Union, they have early and late dates. So the earliest a bird has been seen in our state to the latest a bird has been seen in our state. So maybe it is February, and maybe you think you see a rose-breasted grosbeak out there. You can look at these lists and see. And what's interesting is the Iowa Ornithologists Union also has a listserv where you can post different birds that you have seen in your area. And when perusing this today, I found out that somewhere in eastern Iowa, someone has had a rose-breasted grosbeak at their feeders all of February, which is crazy. So again, there's exceptions to everything. Just being able to use that brain to kind of sort things out is what you need to do. So if you're interested in birding at all, these are some great resources that will help you get started or further you along your bird watching journey. So now I have given you all
Hey,
of
Beth?
this. Yes, go ahead.
Just Jerry, can I interrupt for a minute? So
Yeah.
we had someone asking if you could cover any feeders or specific foods to attract birds or good feeding practices. I don't know if you want to talk about that before or afterwards.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of knowledge about that, but I will tell you that Wild Birds Unlimited and Ames is an amazing resource for that. Let's see. So out here, I can tell you what we do at McFarland Park. We have many different kinds of food because different birds are attracted to different kinds of food. I would say the universal food would be black oil sunflower seed. Has a high calorie content, and that's what birds are trying to get at this time. Lots of calories input, so they don't have to forage all day long. They can hunker down when it is really, really cold out. Jerry, do you have anything to add to that? I would say go to Wild Birds Unlimited in town in Ames, and they can answer. Oh my goodness, so knowledgeable there.
I would agree with that they are probably your best local resource. One thing to keep in mind though, when you go out to buy, I try to shy away from the pre-mixes of lots of different seeds because a lot of those are predominantly millet. And millet is not used by a lot of birds. They end up just throwing that on the ground and you get a lot of waste from it. So you're almost better off, in my opinion, for the dollar for getting like pure sunflower or pure safflower or pure Niger. Tyson's, someone just posted Tyson's has the best price for black oil sunflower seed. If you are worried about the mess, you can also get already hulled sunflowers. So it's just the hearts. So then you don't get that black shell mess all over your yard if you're concerned.
And I'm sure the birds would love you for doing that work for them and getting the hulls off of those seeds. Less work for them. So yeah. So again, lots of new amazing knowledge that I have imparted upon you tonight. What should you do with this? Well, I'm going to invite you to join us in a community science project that happens to be coming up this weekend, the Great Backyard Bird Count. So this is happening starting on Friday through Monday. And this is something that has been taking place since 1998. It was started by the National Audubon Society and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And it is the first online community science program where you can watch real world data coming in. So it's a very cool project to be a part of. anywhere in the world where you have internet access, you can participate in this. They have this really cool thing on their website. I plan on watching this as it starts on Friday, but you can see data coming in from all over the world on this map they have up. So just to be a part of something that is worldwide is pretty awesome. Now, why? Why should you participate? Well, quite a few reasons. Making sure that your birds are counted, okay? Because our birds in Iowa are important. It's also long-term records of the birds. Like I said, this has been happening since 1998. So that is over 20 years of data for scientists to use. Scientists also, they can't be everywhere all of the time, but we can, the community can. So to contribute to that, to something that they are actually going to use is pretty awesome. And it's fun and connects you to nature. So I'm not going to ask why participate. I'm going to ask why not participate, right? What they learn from this, what we can help scientists learn: migration patterns, year-to-year changes, and long-term trends. Again, they are collecting data from all over the place for the past 20 plus years. So an excellent project to be a part of. Now, how do you participate? You can count birds anywhere. It is called the backyard bird count, but literally anywhere you are and anywhere there are birds, you can do this. They do ask, though, that you go bird watching for 15 minutes or longer. That way it just stays consistent across the board. You can count one day. You can count all 4 days. Whatever you want to do, you can count for 15 minutes on one day or 2 hours on all 4 days. Again, whatever you want to do, they are asking you to enter your list each day that you count. So you don't just put in one giant list at the end of the 4 days. Every day you count. Every location you count from is a different list, so they get the most accurate data. Where do you bird watch? You can bird watch out your window. You can go to the city park. You can go to a county park. Come visit McFarland. Anywhere, like I said, there are birds, you can count. Now, what do you need to bird watch? Your eyeballs. That's about it. Many birds are very distinguishable just using your unaided eye. Just look out your window, see what you see, record it. You can get all fancy and get a spotting scope or binoculars, but really show up with your eyeballs. That's all you need to, not even show up, just go to your window and look outside for 15 minutes. Now, how to record the birds? Well, there's a few different ways you can do this. Again, you can use your fancy little handheld computer and download eBird. Super easy to do. It's what I've been checking birds on, doing my bird list out here at McFarland Park on, because like I said, it is so easy. You can submit your list through the computer or through the phone or through the website. If this is confusing to you, they have this really simple eBirds Essential course you can take. You don't have to, but you can. I am going to share a different screen here because I want to take you on a journey through, let's see. That is not what I want. I apologize. This is still fairly new to me. Here we go. Is that visible to everybody out there? Should be up there. Okay, so this is my page on eBird. So it's my
Hey,
personal.
Beth, this is Jerry.
Oh, go ahead.
Your screen share is not correct right now.
Oh, it's not on eBird?
No, it's still on All
shoot.
About Birds.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Let me here we go. Share. Is that better?
That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. That is why we all need assistance from time to time. So you can see on this is all of my data from when I started using eBird. So super easy. You sign in, it takes you to your personal page. You click submit if you want to do this through the computer, and it just is going to ask you a few different questions. So you can choose from your location. So I'm out here at McFarland Park. That is our address. So I'm going to click continue. The date, we'll go ahead and choose today. And then it's going to ask you, were you traveling? Like, were you hiking outside? Were you stationary? Was birding your primary purpose, but you don't remember when you started or finished? Did you see a bird that you want to record, but you weren't really out bird watching? So it wants everything. It doesn't care if you were out just wandering around or driving down the road and, oh my gosh, there's a snowy owl in the field. That would be incidental. They want to know that. So usually if I'm out here, I'm stationary because we have amazing bird feeders right outside our windows, so I can plop myself down with my phone and just click on different species that I see. So we'll go ahead and keep going on with this just to show everybody, whoops, how simple this can be if you don't have slippery fingers like I do. So let's say I started at 9 o'clock this morning. I sat there for 15 minutes. Party size. I did not have a party while bird watching. It was just me. So I'm going to click continue. And then right here is where you add your species. Now there's not even a ton on here. We have 390 species of birds that are in Iowa at one time or another. And you can see this list is not 390 species long. So you click on what you've seen. Most of these birds, I'm going to be down here with the woodpeckers or jays, those different things. I can put in today, there was one red-bellied woodpecker at the feeder, and then you click submit. And it's going to ask you, are you reporting all the birds you saw to the best of your ability? I always click yes, because I try to do my best at all times. Then you click submit, and I'm not going to do that because that was not an actual sighting I saw today, but that literally took me like 2 minutes to complete. If you are on your phone, it is even simpler. You click the number of birds. Every time you see them, you click submit and you're done. So it is, again, a very simple thing to be a part of. Again, don't ask why you should participate, ask why not participate. It's a very easy thing to take part in. And I'm going to go back to screen sharing here. I don't have too much left for you all tonight. In fact, it is time for questions. If you have any questions, please make sure you put them in the chat box, and I would love to answer any of your questions you might have tonight. If you don't have questions now, but maybe you think of them after the fact, which I always do, my name and email address are at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to email me with your questions. Again, if I can't answer them, I will find somebody who can. Jerry, do we have any questions at this time?
Lily, age 7, asked, why do people bring birds? I guess she's asking, why do people introduce birds into areas that they're not from?
Oh, gotcha. Sometimes it is accidental, so they don't mean to do it. The birds might hop a ride on a ship, and then they're in this new land, and it just happens to be perfect for them. As the case with the starling, someone thought they were doing a good thing by introducing starlings to the United States because they just loved Shakespeare plays so much. They thought everybody should enjoy all of the birds. So again, most of the time it's not done on purpose. Sometimes it is though, and there's some pretty interesting reasons behind those. Thank you for that question.
If I may chime in also, you know, when a lot of times when people go to a new land, nothing looks familiar, so they feel kind of homesick. So by bringing something from their home area and putting it in the new area, it makes them feel more comfortable and at home.
Yep, that is probably the case, I'm guessing, behind pheasants. They wanted that game bird over here that they were used to hunting back home. And now we have pheasants. Any other questions?
Another person asked, should the thistle seed be non-germinating so the thistle doesn't grow?
Oh, that is another good question that I do not know the answer to. Jerry, what do you have any input?
I do not know. I do know that a lot of times when you go to look for thistle, it's under the name of Niger seed. And I don't know if it's non-germinating, but that's a very good question. I would say ask your bird feeding expert at Wild Birds Unlimited or any of the other bird feeding stores around.
Definitely.
Okay,
Anything
I have
else?
one question here I missed. What is the best place in your yard to put a bird feeder? We have one on the porch and it is not getting much use.
Oh, so I'm wondering if by your porch you have much shelter, because birds don't like to be out in the open for very long. So maybe if you find a place close to a tree, like not in the tree, but close enough to it that they can go back and forth. A lot of birds will use those feeders as kind of a grocery store. So they'll fly there, they'll pack their cheeks and or whatever with the seed, and then they'll fly off. They'll unload the seed somewhere and then they'll come back and get more. They don't like to hang out a lot at the bird feeders because a lot of times they'll just feel vulnerable to things that want to get them. So making sure that there is shelter close by might be a good way to get invite those birds to your bird feeder. Any other questions?
There are no more questions at this time.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me tonight in this frigid February evening. I hope that many of you will join the Great Backyard Bird Count this weekend. Like I said, you have 4 days and do it from the comfort of your home or bundle up and get outside. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to answer them. So have a great evening, everybody.